So of course the topic here is hope, and you are, I would say, one of the foremost leading experts in the world around this topic of hope, which we all kind of think we know what it is, but when you dive into it, there's a lot more to hope.
Right.
And you're gonna help our audience with that today, because it's a very powerful. Is it the right word? It's an emotion plus. It's not just an emotion. But before we even get to that, what is the good news around? What are the outcomes?
Sure.
Of more hope in our lives?
So hope has been identified as one of the strongest predictors of our well-being, of our capacity to thrive, for children, for adults, for families. So we see, significant outcomes associated with mental well-being, physical health. We see significant improvements in pain tolerance, for instance, in recovery from very traumatic, diagnoses like cancer or diabetes. Better treatment outcomes associated with that. In the workplace, we're actually identifying that when we nurture hope in the workplace, significant reductions in burnout. And our Oklahoma Department of Human Services just connected hope to a 17% reduction in turnover in the workforce, $61 million cost savings to taxpayers.
And longevity. So it's
right.
Lower turnover, and have we been able to quantify that, or we know it just increases longevity in some cases?
No, it's statistically we've quantified that. We did an initial study several years ago here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, just an initiative called How Hopeful is Tulsa, partnered with the health department, and found a really strong correlation between hope and life expectancy.
Let's define it from your perspective, which is a deeper definition than I think what most Americans are walking around thinking what hope is. So what, to you that studies this and teaches this and researches this, how do you define hope? What is it?
Sure. So hope is the expectation or the belief that the future is going to be better. And more importantly, that I have a role to play in pursuing that future. So it's a really simple definition.
So that's what intrigued me here, is that hope before reading your material is that I think the future will be better, but that's only half of it.
That's right.
The other half of hope is that we have something to do with it, which is different from what is that? Is it different from optimism, or maybe it's hope versus wish? Hope we can do something about, wish we just...
Yeah. So if we think about really the core components of hope, it's about, our ability to set important goals or desirable goals for the future. But more importantly, do we have the ability or the capacity to identify the pathways or the strategies to achieve those goals? And then ultimately, do we have the willpower? Can we muster the mental energy and focus our attention on those pathway pursuits? So that part of the definition and description of hope differentiates it from both optimism and wishing. So wishing is when we have a desire for an outcome. I hope there are no tornadoes today here in Oklahoma. I greatly desire that, but I have no pathways. Wishing is passive towards the future. Hope is about taking action to pursue that future.
Yeah, I want my team to win. I'm hopeful that my team will win, but it doesn't. That's actually not hope. That's just I wish. I wish they would win.
Right. I travel a lot. I'm sure you do as well. I get on a plane and I hope that the planes are on time. I hope there are no delays. And
gosh, I hope the plane just doesn't go down.
Yeah, I don't even want to go there.
But again, that's just wishful. I wish I have no control.
That's right. That's exactly right.
All right. So you spent some of your high school years you spent as homeless, and I know you talk a lot about hope in relation to trauma and how we've the difficulties we've gone through our life and how that can impact it. So let's start with that. You were What happened? If I go back to high school for
Sure.
you.
So I made the decision. Ultimately, my father, who was a lot of fond memories. I guess I should start there, but a lot of adversity as well. He was a drug dealer, and I was involved in that process from a very early age. Ultimately, made that transition into um, being homeless. Where I spent every day really focused on, where am I going to get access to food? How am I going to stay safe? Where am I going to sleep tonight? And so really, really just day to day survival. You know,
So you had to get out essentially of that situation, and you landed with no money and landed home, but you still were able to go to high school?
I, uh, I was actually very successful in keeping my situation hidden.
Mhm.
So I could actually go to school very early, show up very early, go to the gym, take a shower, for instance, because I was also a student athlete during that time. School was the one place I got a meal, and it was really a couple of teachers who really kind of just leaned into me, that helped me see that something different is possible.
And they knew? Do you think they knew?
No, they didn't. I've actually talked to the one teacher in particular who I attribute to saving my life, quite frankly.
Can you tell us that story?
Sure, sure. So I was really I just transitioned into homelessness. I was in eighth grade, and one day during school, I just was. Well, I'll just be blunt. I had set a plan. I was going to escape the pain. So I had a plan to end my life. Had a date, and on that day, this teacher came up and leaned into me and just told me I was going to be okay. He knew I was struggling. He didn't really know what was happening. And literally that evening, as I had the shotgun barrel underneath my chin, that all I could keep hearing was his voice saying, "You're going to be okay." And that I literally, that's why that's why I think I didn't go forward with that plan.
And then was that you weren't really thinking about the study or research of the study of hope then, but that kind of plays into how you talk about it, how we define it, and how we can increase our levels of this. So
Yeah.
let's walk through that. What are the components of it?
Yeah, so hope is very personal to me, obviously, but it's also very professionally. I'm fortunate enough to be a professor where I get to research this concept of hope and how trauma and adversity rob us of our capacity for hope. And I think this one is one of our studies that I think will really resonate with your audience, is that when you and I are experiencing adversity and stress, even in our day to day adversity and stress, we're much more likely to set goals that are avoidant in nature. But when we're able to nurture and restore hope, we see a transition towards an achievement mindset. And this becomes really important as we think about hope because um, if imagine that I'm a basketball player, I step out on the court and my mindset is I want to get the ball and shoot the winning shot for the team. That's an achievement mindset. But if that same player steps on the court and their mindset is, I hope they don't throw me the ball because I'm probably going to lose it and really disappoint my team, that's an avoidant mindset. The importance is think about how those two players behave on the court. So the nature of our goals drives our pathways thinking. And
Those are both, Chan, those are both, there's hope in both,
yeah,
right? The
absolutely.
first one is, I hope we win, but I don't want to be the guy on the line for
Sure,
this.
sure.
And the other is I hope we win and I want to be the guy on the
That's
line.
right.
They're both hopeful strategies. One is to your point is avoidant,
Mhm.
and one is what would you call it, achievement based or
Yeah.
constructive?
Yeah, as constructive or positive, some people might refer to it. Both are very, very important. For instance, when the pandemic first hit, we all moved to remote work. And we went to remote work so that we wouldn't get exposed to the virus. Now, not getting exposed to the virus is a good goal.
Mhm.
The problem is that it's coming from fear and uncertainty. And it's the fear and uncertainty that's driving that goal. So that's what I study. And then how do we turn that ship around?
Well, first, how do we measure it? How, and I'm sure you've done it in many different ways, but in general, how have you found it best to quantify this?
Yeah, so we have standard validated measures. There's an adult hope scale. It takes about 7 or 8 minutes to take the test and to get your score. There's a children's hope scale, which is validated for children ages 7 to 17. It takes about 7 to 10 minutes to administer and score. And we just developed a brand new measure. And it's currently under review for publication, but it's this concept of collective hope. And I've really gotten kind of interested that if individual hope is so powerful, what would collective hope look like in an organization or a community?
What would be? Give me an example of a question for either one. A kid, let's say I've got 4 kids. I think I sit them down and say, "Hey, take this hope scale test as a baseline."
Mhm.
What are the kind of questions you ask them?
Yeah, so it's going to be generally pathways and willpower questions like I can find many strategies to achieve my goals, or it might say that I can find the energy to pursue the goals that I desire. There may even be a question about even when I face barriers, I can generally find strategies to still pursue my goals. So,
By the way, this is what on
yes,
a scale 1 to 5.
yeah, so a scale like what we call a Likert type scale. So, kind of like a strongly disagree to a strongly agree. Um, so it's a little longer than that, but again, it's doesn't take very long at all. Your audience can search for these on the internet. They're readily available, easy access for both children and
Would you call it a so an adult hope scale?
adult hope scale or the children's hope scale.
And then does that give us a sense of how we are and today or in general?
Sure. So it measures. There's actually two different measures. One that measures kind of where you are right now today, and the other one is more what we would refer to as dispositional, which is I'm generally this way with the goals that I have. I prefer the dispositional or kind of that stable characteristic. It's more predictive of those positive outcomes. For instance, if you can show a 2-point increase in a child's hope score, it will predict a letter grade change in a classroom. It is that powerful. A children's hope scale is a better predictor of first year college performance and retention than standardized testing or high school GPAs.
Holy. No wonder no wonder you've dedicated your career to this. It's a powerful tool, but we can increase we can get better at hope our hope scale or our hope I guess our internal hope what would you call it?
Yeah.
Would you call it a baseline?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of this concept is, because hope is a cognitive process that involves our ability to set goals, identify pathways, and to really generate that willpower. Because it's a cognitive process, we can teach it. We know it is something that we can teach and learn. And I'll tell you, we're working right now with 3 and 4-year-olds in preschool doing kindergarten readiness strategies using hope. And 4-year-olds are teaching their parents what hope is in classrooms.
Ooh, how all right, what's an example? Not necessarily a 4-year-old or
Sure.
anybody, a 15-year-old, a 35-year-old. What's an example of how someone can increase their propensity towards how you've described hope?
Sure. So really, let's just think about the three components: goals, pathways, and willpower.
All right. Well, I want to. I want to. I don't want to. I don't know if we've covered that yet, but those are maybe. Let's start with that again, real quick. So, hope is goals, pathway, willpower. Can you just tell us what those three things are?
Yeah. So hope is based upon a really simple concept. It's based upon goals, pathways, and willpower. Now, goals are the cornerstone of everything with hope. From the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed, you and I are pursuing goals in our life. We are goal driven. The question with hope is whether or not we have the ability to identify the pathways or the roadmaps that we're going to use to get there from here. And then willpower is that mental energy that you and I have to dedicate towards those pathways. This is really about the ability to focus our attention and intention on those pathway pursuits.
So it's a three-part recipe, essentially.
Exactly.
So then we get to how do we
Right.
teach that?
Yeah.
I guess we have to work on. First of all, we have to work on all three to some extent.
We do. The first thing that I would tell people is to let's start small. Let's not focus on summiting the mountain, but let's start really small. So what is one thing that you would really like to accomplish this week? Let's talk about that goal a little bit. Make sure we define it. I'll even, was one of the things that I would do is say, now imagine that you've achieved that goal. How is your life different? What changes for you? How do you feel when you achieve that goal? And this falls under what we call imagination is the instrument of hope. And so it's the ability for you to see yourself in the future. And what that does is that it generates that willpower, that motivation for this.
Where is the pathway, though? So
once we identify that desirable outcome, now we're going to say, okay, let's brainstorm 2 or 3 strategies that we could use to get there from here. So, for instance, if my goal is to get healthy, I know that's a big lofty goal.
That's a good one.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there's lots of pathways. So I could focus on my nutrition. I could join a gym. I could go for a daily walk. So those are 3 different strategies. They may be related, but they're 3 different strategies. Now, the next thing I'm going to think about or ask you is, let's brainstorm what are some of the barriers to those. So eating healthy, my schedule is just horrible. I'm eating out at restaurants all the time. So sometimes that's going to be really hard for me. Joining a gym, same reason. I would never be consistent in being able to get there. But, no matter where I'm at, I can go for a walk or a run. So that's the pathway I'm going to choose. So, okay, now I've got the pathway. The next thing we've got to start identifying is what are the steps in that pathway? What are the small benchmarks that we're going to need to identify to pursue that goal?
And is that the willpower side of this?
This actually starts to show the interplay between willpower and pathways. Once we identify a desirable goal, our energy, our desire is increased. But once we see the pathway in that first step or second step and say, I can do this, then our motivation continues to increase.
Yeah, which is hope, which to some extent, do you teach that hope to some extent begets hope?
I was just going to say that. That's really the principle is hope begets hope. And what this reminds us is to start small. My goal is to get healthy. But my first step is to go buy some walking shoes or running shoes. My second step is to establish a schedule. I'm a morning person, so I'm going to run in the mornings. Those are 2 things I know I can accomplish today. And so my motivation starts to increase as I meet those benchmarks.
And there is this thought around the initial overcoming of the inertia on anything we're doing it's harder in the beginning, and then it takes less mental energy to continue on.
That,
And exercise is a perfect example of that. It's, the first, if you're out of the gym for 5 years, the first couple times, it's just it like takes up the day. It's like, it's a really big deal. And then as you do it more and more, and you can tell I'm speaking from experience here. I went about 5 years of not working out, and several months ago, I did some of these pathways to get back to doing it, and I remember just the first few were. It's just a really big deal. It took up a lot of mental energy to go. Took a lot of mental energy to finish. Then afterwards, like, wow, that was a lot. And then now it's much more just, oh, I'm going to go work out, and it's not going to take up half a day.
Right.
That is in general. I guess that's willpower. It's not necessarily I'm hopeful, or maybe it is.
Well, it is, but it's also, it's making that transition to requiring less and less of your mental energy. In fact, what probably happens for you is once you get into that rhythm, or the habit of, that pathway, missing the workout is probably causing more sort of alertness, awareness, and taking up more of your willpower than what's it going to take for you to get to the gym tomorrow.
You tell a story about meeting. I think it was a teenager who was going through huge adversity. Tell our audience that story.
Sure. So David was this young man's name. He was 19 years old. And to be honest, David's the one who introduced me to this concept of hope. This was really my first interaction into it. And David shared with me that 3 months earlier, he learned that he was HIV positive. As a psychologist, I'm listening to him thinking about depression, anxiety. He further shares with me that when he told his parents that he was HIV positive, they kicked him out of the house. He had spent those last 2 weeks homeless. And so now I'm thinking about, depression, anxiety, social isolation. And as I'm thinking about these things in listening to David, he shifts the conversation by sharing with me that he's gone down to the local community college. He made an appointment with an academic counselor, came back to that appointment, enrolled in his first semester of college. And it just really struck me in that moment that I realized really for the first time that well-being is more than the reduction of what's wrong with us.
Say that again, the well-being.
Yeah, well-being is more than the reduction of what's wrong. So as a psychologist, it's very important for us to identify depression and to engage in those strategies to mitigate depression. And that's very important. But the reduction of depression is not happiness.
What is it?
Well, it's just that reduction of those depressive symptoms. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm experiencing a pleasant life or, finding joy and contentment. And so what I started to realize was that David had this sort of future expectation in the midst of all this adversity that at first, I'll be honest, I thought it was optimism. And as I began to explore, that's when I discovered that it was hope. And
because it's a focus around what is right and what we can continue to do more around focusing in on what is right versus what is wrong.
That's a great way of saying it. That's absolutely right.
If we're thinking, if we were to maybe walk through some of the physical and physiological changes maybe that people go through when they lose hope, what happens to someone?
Yeah, so the first thing, the loss of hope is what we refer to this as a process. So, when you and I experience a barrier to our pathway, we might experience anger, frustration, anxiety around that. If we're unable to overcome that barrier, we might start to feel a sense of urgency. You and I feel those kinds of tensions in our body when, whatever's going to happen needs to happen right now. That urgency. If and the problem with urgency is that we can begin to make rash decisions, rash grasping of those pathways. And again, as we continue to transition, we next would move into despair. A feeling of just true angst around that thing that I cannot have. And then ultimately, the opposite of hope is apathy. It's when we give up. It's, I'm not going to do it anymore.
And that's why the component of willpower is so important, because as that goes away, then so does hope.
That's exactly right. Willpower is really about your endurance, during times of adversity. Can you endure through? And at what point do you just give up?
And how do we work on that? I think that, so our audience is sitting here thinking, okay, I think if I'm listening, I'm thinking, how do I get more hope? What do I do? I know how to set a goal. Now, maybe that's easy for some people to say and not as easy for others.
That's right.
Right. So it is then setting this goal, then setting a pathway to be able to achieve it. But then how do we work on the willpower part of it?
Yeah. So there's a couple strategies.
And how do we know we're not too hopeful? Is there, I guess you could be too optimistic, but would you say you can't be too hopeful then?
The data doesn't show that being too hope, what we would call extremely high hope, produces any type of negative outcome. So far, the research is showing you can't be too hopeful. I think what people are sort of going to be wrestling with in that statement is the idea of false hope. I want to be an NBA basketball star. Is that false hope? The thing is the probability is pretty low, but there are pathways, right? Joining a team, practicing your shots, etc. But to go back to your original question, what I would suggest is that people think about the domains in their life. So let's say my health or my relationships, my financial well-being, my housing, employment, whatever, write down, maybe the 3 or 4 domains that are most important to you, and then pick one and start to set a goal. Maybe it's the short term goal that we talked about earlier, but and then once you identify those goals within those domains, then it's again the pathways. How are you going to get there from here? What are some strategies? But the idea about really nurturing that willpower comes from a couple of different places. One of those, and I refer to this as hope is a social gift. And what I mean by that is hope is about relationships. It's about our connectedness to others. And so, hope doesn't really happen just in isolation with us. It happens in relationships. So we start to think about, even going to a gym, right? Having a trainer, or maybe having a couple of friends you go to the gym with as an accountability kind of partner. So the other thing is, and it's still within that social aspect of it, is, when you identify something that you desire, a goal, who is the hope model in your life? Who are people who have done that? And how did they get there from here? How do you start to research who they are, how they got there, and let them model those pathway strategies?
So you're saying hope is a social gift or a social construct. That's true if you think about it. Yeah, as I'm thinking this through, it's hard to think about anything you're hoping for that is just singular.
That's absolutely right. And you and I exist in our relationships to our groups, and there's real value in that social commerce, right? When you and I work on a goal together, that possibly could be more efficient and effective.
As a parent, how can I teach more hope to my kids?
Sure.
And to some extent, I guess this again, what's helpful in this conversation is that it's not optimism. It is really about well, you tell me. How do I teach my kids to be more hopeful?
Sure. So let's start with pretty young kids. Although I think, quite frankly, I really enjoy Marvel movies. So I think this could go across the lifespan. But
well, you are in the right place for that. You cannot find a bigger Marvel fan than me.
Well, I'll tell you, every single movie is about hope. Every one of them. The main character has a goal in the movie, and at some point, the protagonist or whatever, they experience this tremendous barrier. So let's just go with a Disney movie for small children.
Okay, we'll start there, but I'd much rather a Marvel. I'd much rather an Avenger example, but let's start.
Okay.
I'm okay. We'll start with Disney,
So working with really young children,
which owns Marvel, so
yeah,
it's
right,
okay.
Right. It's all in the same financial family. So, so let's say that we're sitting down watching a Disney show with our children. And one of the things you can do is, let's say you're going to stop and maybe get a snack or whatever, but you can start to have a conversation with your child about, what is Nemo's goal here? In this moment, what is Nemo trying to achieve? And then when Nemo experiences that barrier, he's in the fish tank. And
by the way, for those listeners who do not know the movie Finding Nemo,
yeah.
You're talking about a little orange fish here.
That's right.
Who seemingly impossible goal to go find his friends.
That's right. That's right.
His dad.
His dad.
Yeah.
Right. And so, he's got these tremendous barriers. And so you can stop and talk to, the children about, how does Nemo feel? And why is it when we're blocked from things that, and the reason I think that it's important to identify that Nemo is sad and, maybe angry is because I think we also need to help our children realize that those are normal, natural human emotions. And it's okay. We all will feel sad and angry and those kinds of things. But as the movie progresses, and this is my point, even to the Avenger side, is that in every one of these movies, the way in which the main character overcomes the barrier is exactly the same. And what I mean by that is they never overcome the barrier alone. It's always with their friends or some shared experience that people come together. And this is hope is a social gift played out.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Even if you're going to go to let's call it like a Superman analogy or a Man of Steel, another one of the best. Now that's not a Marvel, but it's still one of the best. Even those films where you have the most powerful superhero, he always ends up teaming up with someone. Mm-hmm. It's never a singular event. And I don't know if I never noticed that, but you're right.
Well, even, staying with the DC, there's even animosity sometimes within the characters that they still come together. Now, with children, I think it's an important opportunity to start to identify, well, who are people you can reach out to when, so your family, maybe some friends, maybe a teacher. But more importantly, when your friends are struggling, can you help them? Right. So it sort of helps teach maybe that empathy a little bit. But I think movies are a great way. Children's books, same thing, same strategy. And it's kind of fun, right? You get some.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's the best. I think and I now that my kids are a little older, I do miss a little bit. When they were a little younger, it was easier to sit down and watch a movie together.
Yeah.
And now that they're getting to be teenagers, that's a little harder. I miss that. I miss the collective effervescence of watching a Marvel movie together. What about faith?
Sure.
What does your research say about the role of faith?
Sure.
Which is, I don't know. I don't know if you put this in the hope camp because it's, well, you tell me.
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, I think faith and hope are really complementary concepts, first of all. Once we understand, that hope is about setting goals, finding those pathways, generating that willpower, then the next thing we need to understand is what are the values that you have that help you identify which goals you want to pursue, which pathways you choose, etc. And for some people, for many people, faith is that compass. So my faith helps me identify the goals that I value and to find those pathways that are righteous, that is consistent with my value system. So, for instance, if my goal is to get money for the weekend and my pathway is to run out to the parking lot here on campus and break into those vehicles, and I'm highly motivated to do that, I'm a high hope person. But, if I think about what sort of buffers me from engaging in those negative pathways, faith can be a driver for people.
So faith is almost this. It's a guide. It's a guiding path for our pathways, for our goals, for our hope.
hmm I've been involved in some research with more of a religious kind of driven view of faith. I was just interested. I've published research on mindfulness, for instance, and hope. But I was interested, for instance, if engagement in prayer, engagement in scripture. And what we find is that when youth, regardless of religion, by the way, regardless of religion, when youth engage in prayer, their hope scores are higher.
Well, I would say that again here on the Retire Sooner podcast, there's certainly a large element of our thinking through our finances and thinking through how we can get our finances to a fundamentally strong baseline so that we reduce our anxiety over time and we have more economic freedom to pursue the other side of what makes for a happy retirement, which would be the lifestyle choices. What would you? I know you're not a retirement expert, but here on a retirement based show, what are some things that you can think about to when you're heading into retirement that you can think about and talk about hope in that next stage of life when we're finished our primary career, which by the way is really tough for a lot of people.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm probably 1 or 2 years away from retiring from the university as a professor, and I'll be doing hope work full time. But your question resonates a lot with me because what I've been thinking about is in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years, what do I want my lifestyle to be like? And so in the first 5 years, my wife and I have talked about having 1 or 2 adventures. And so we set
Per year or per year?
no, within those 5 years, the first
Okay.
5 years. So, one is to, maybe spend 6 months to a year in Europe.
Oh, that is an adventure.
That's
Okay, I was thinking just a big trip. You're talking about that's a real adventure. Yeah.
So then we have to start thinking about, well, what is that going to cost? What's that going to do to our retirement savings, et cetera? And so it really kind of shapes, is Europe out of our price range? And then maybe we think about something smaller. We can re-goal. So, I think about it in that time frame. For me, I also think about the legacy that I want to leave for my children and grandchildren. And by the way, as you mentioned, your children being a little bit older, I have grandchildren who are between 2 years old and 14 years old. And all I got to tell you is having grandchildren is everything you had hoped being a parent would be. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. But
Are they near? Do they live near you? By the way,
yeah.
Are they in Tulsa?
Yeah, so all of our grandchildren and our children live within about 10 minutes of us, so we're very fortunate. in that regard.
I wrote a chapter in What the Happiest Retirees Know about family habits of happy versus unhappy retirees. My research found that if we live near 50% or more of our adult children, our propensity to end up in the happy retiree versus unhappy retiree camp goes up between 2 and 5 times.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's very
So
interesting.
you're clearly going to be a happy. That's a huge. I think it's a very. There's a lot of different pieces to that recipe. I think that one carries a lot of weight. I think it's a really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much so that I've had many conversations over the years with families that I counsel on the financial side, but I look at both sides of the equation. That I'm trying to do everything I can to get parents near their adult children, and of course, that's not always easy, right? Kids go to school out of state, and then they end up getting a job out of state and meet someone from out of state, and they get married and they stay. So it's not always that easy, but I think it is a good. If I were a retiree and my kids lived all over the country, I would be hopeful. Probably put in a pathway and have a lot of willpower to make sure I lived within driving distance of of my kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the legacy of your children.
Yeah. So one of the things that my wife and I did, and I'm an educator, so my financial well-being is pretty modest in that regard. But one of the things that I learned probably in the last 5 years that I wish I would have engaged in a lot earlier is I met with a financial advisor. My wife and I did, and I strongly advise my children now to do the same thing, even in their 30s, because legacy doesn't mean 6 zeros. A legacy has to do with a whole host of other aspects about our assets, and to just be able to plan and to know that my children are less likely to have to contribute to my financial well-being is really what I wanted to ensure.
And so you've taken care of your own finances, is what you're saying,
right.
So that you're not relying on them at all,
right? And hopefully, when my wife and I both pass, they'll get some benefit out of that.
Your book that you wrote, which was Hope Rising, how the science of hope can change your life. How can it, as we wrap up today, how can it change your life? Tell our listeners what you think deep down this practice can change.
So sure. So really, first of all, the science of hope is clear. Hope is one of the strongest predictors of our capacity to thrive, of our well-being. It matters. The second thing that I think I would really fall back on is it's really simple. The framework of hope is simple and focused on the goals, the pathways, and the willpower. So the framework of hope is something you can implement in your life today. The final thing I would say about that is to remember that hope is who we are. What it means to be human is to have an expectation that the future can be better.
How is if we're thinking about scoring and increasing our hopefulness and our practice of hope on a score level, how have you seen yours gone up? How have you seen others who are practicing this? Do you think of it on a percentage basis? What's the scale you look at?
Sure. Yeah. So what I really focus on is because I'm a psychologist and because I really specialize in areas of trauma and adversity. I recently was part of an evaluation where we did a evaluation of 1,500 adults in a 3-month time frame. So really a kind of a pre-assessment, do a little bit of the hope work, goals, pathways, willpower, and then 3 months later, assess it again. And what we found is that 88% of people who scored lower in hope increased their hope scores. So it is
Over what period of time again?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, and we probably could have shortened that time. In one of the workshops that I did, I measured hope before teaching people how to do hope and afterwards. And what I found was a statistically significant increase in hope in 1 hour. In 1 hour, you can change the trajectory of that future expectation.
A lot or a little? What on the scale? How much are you trying to turn it up?
We saw, I think it was about a 3 point for adults, on average, about a 3 point increase.
On what? On how big of a scale?
Sure, on a low of 8 to a high of 64. So we just moved the needle. But we have to remember that with youth, that 2 point increase will predict a letter grade change in the classroom, right? So with adults, we see pretty similar outcomes. It's not about going from low to high. It's about moving the needle, starting the journey
in the right direction.
In the right direction.
And we can do that by watching an Avenger movie and then talking about it a little bit, because I had not ever thought about the collective hope and how it's such a group effort. I think it's an amazing thing to think about, and it's an easy story to tell, and it's something that I'm going to be pointing out to my kids next time. If I still have a 8-year-old, so it's not like I don't have I still have younger. Some of my kids are a little younger, and some of them still like to hang out and watch movies. Not all of them. Has your hope score gone up, or do you have to like work at it? Is it like the gym?
Yeah, so it's like a gym, and hope is going to ebb and flow in our lives. So once I nurture my hope score, life happens, and some days are better than others. What happens with hope, like going to a gym and really thinking about hope as a muscle, is that when I'm facing a lot of stress and adversity, like at work, then I know to stop and to think about what are my goals, what are the strategies that I'm going to get there. And it actually statistically, when we nurture hope, we are better at coping with daily stress.
Well, I think the practice of this, the science of hope, the practice of hope, is something that it's a benefit to learn about for humanity.
Right.
It's everyone can get better at this.
That's absolutely right.
And it should create better life outcomes, period. Longevity, better at school, better job performance or less turnover. I mean, I like all those boxes. I'd like to check all of those boxes.
Yes, absolutely.
Chan.
Absolutely.
Well, where can we find you and your work? What's an easy way to find you without necessarily hopping on a plane, hoping it makes it to Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Sure. So we have a website. It's real easy to find. It's chanhellman.com. It'll
HELLMAN.
That's right. .com. So that's probably the easiest place to find. There's certainly the TED Talk if people want to review again, and it's the Science of Hope is the TED Talk.
I loved your TED Talk. That's how we found it.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know where we found it, but I think I found it somewhere, or maybe you're in an article somewhere. And I asked our team, I said, "Can you go find this guy? Can you go find Chan? See if he's still alive. Is he still with us? I don't know. I have no idea how long ago that TED Talk was."
Yeah, 21. It was 2021.
Well, this is awesome, and it's I don't know. I feel a little better today than I did even before we started, and I was excited about talking with you today. So
thank you. Same here.
All right, Chan. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. What an honor.